Mom and Dad, since this is your anniversary year, we're going to ask you some questions about how you met and when you first got together. So, how did you meet?
I'm first. We met in our Old Testament class at DePauw University, Greencastle, Indiana. And we also met in a history class. I think maybe history was the first semester. Which was it?
Well, both the same semester.
Oh.
But in the history class, there were several disciplines. And so 6 of us got together to sort of help each other get ready for exams. Brenda was the coach in philosophy, and I was the coach in history.
Yeah.
We met at the minister's house, because the minister's son was a fraternity brother of mine, Eddie Caruth.
Which year were you in school?
Freshman.
Freshman?
This is
Second semester?
1956. Started in 56.
And what's interesting is that later I became a history major and he became a philosophy major. But during that time, I was enthralled because I knew nothing about philosophy, and I just really loved reading about it.
So that's why you were the coaching?
That's why I was coaching in the philosophy part.
They were both involved in the Methodist student movement on campus on Sunday nights. Brenda much more in the first year than I, because the fraternity was putting us through freshman training. But the second year, we were both quite active in the Methodist student movement. Actually met, was it Tuesday mornings for early morning prayer with David Pomeroy before we went to class.
And then didn't you take some trips with that group too?
Yes. I don't think you did the first year.
I didn't. Sophomore year, we went to Washington, D.C., and that was a great experience.
And what did you guys do when you were in Washington?
We actually visited some of the embassies, and it was our first exposure to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict.
50 years ago.
We heard from both sides.
Wow.
We couldn't decide who was right. They just made such strong cases for their point of view.
Eisenhower was, of course, president then, and his press secretary was a DePauw graduate. So
James Haggerty.
So he arranged for all of us to go into the White House. We actually went into the Oval Office. Of course, this is...
Not on a tour, but right into the Oval Office.
Mm-hmm. You just walk, yeah.
Yeah.
And he gave us about 2 hours of conversation, and that was
with the press secretary, with Haggerty?
So that was a real...
Very special.
Wow, yes.
And then one night, Brenda and I went out to meet Uncle Dick and Pauline at a restaurant, because they were living in Washington at that time.
Oh, okay. Because you guys were now good friends.
Good friends, yeah.
Your sophomore year.
Yeah, we were really good friends by our sophomore year. Best friends, I'd say. Junior year on, maybe sophomore year. We were always dating somebody else, and so we would unload on our best friend, tell him everything.
Support each other.
And then when did you meet the Dowells? Did you meet the Dowells freshman year or sophomore year?
We have to ask him that, don't we?
Well, Dwayne and I, of course, were waiters at the Alpha Guy House, where Vera was a sorority member. So I started the second semester of my freshman year waiting there. But I don't think we came close until, well, actually, that first year was an interesting story because the pledge classes run away from the fraternity for a weekend away. And we were going to Chicago, and we had to hitchhike. So I hitchhiked. My first ride got me to Crawfordsville, Indiana. And I was standing between Cornfield 1 and Cornfield 2, and this little bus came up and offered to pick me up. Dwayne was driving. It was the Theta freshman class on their runaway.
But they were all together in a bus.
So I sat on the step in the front. Dwayne drove, and had all these freshmen Thetas in behind us.
Oh, you didn't mind that at all.
That was funny.
They were going to one of the girls' houses in Ogden Dunes up on the
yeah, Dwayne used to drive the MSM bus, Methodist Student Movement bus.
It's a little mini bus.
And I suppose that that's how he got hired to take him.
Yeah, so we were waiting buddies, and of course he was dating Vera. And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So what about junior year?
Well, also they went on a lot of the Methodist Student Movement deputations. The way we didn't have to pay for any of them. I don't think they went the first year. The first year, Tom didn't go, but I went to Atlanta, and so I went twice, freshman and sophomore or junior.
Well, our sophomore year, you and I went to Washington.
Okay, so it was freshman and
Junior.
junior.
Our junior year, we went to Atlanta.
Okay.
But the sophomore year, another Dwayne story, that he drove the bus again during Christmas break. We all went to Lawrence, Kansas for a big Methodist student gathering. 5,000 Methodist students at the
Wow.
University of Kansas.
I didn't go.
The second night it snowed. The kids from the South had never seen snow, so it was wonderful throwing snowballs inside this big basketball arena.
Oh, that's very fun.
But our times in Atlanta were life-changing because we studied the history of segregation, what the church was doing about it or not doing about it in the South.
So when you went to Atlanta, you both went when you were juniors?
Yeah.
Where
Yes.
did you stay?
At Clark College, it was a black college. There are 5 black colleges, and we stayed at one of those. It was our first, at least my first experience of being in a black college. Went to breakfast, and here's this wall-high picture of a black Jesus I'd never seen. Like that before. So that was very eye-opening. Then we cooked up a scheme because we were both writing papers on something in Georgia, education. We talked our way into Governor Vandiver's press conference by saying we were reporters for the Daily Student at IU because it was more prestigious than from DePauw.
So you thought they would let you in for that
And they
reason?
did. They believed us, and that was the press conference where he closed the schools of Georgia. Very historic,
Wow.
rather than desegregate.
So Mother asked a question, and he answered it. But going out, the reporter from the Atlanta Constitution took us aside and said, "You better be very careful because you'll be tailed from now on because of the question you asked."
You've got to be careful for your life. And didn't they take us home or something?
He did. He drove us back.
Yeah.
Oh, do you remember what the question was? All these years later? No. And was that trip when you met Julian Bond? Or was that a different?
Not Julian Bond.
Very sure.
Vernon
Jordan.
Jordan was in 2 years. I mean, we already knew him. He was at DePauw as a student. But he later became head of the
Urban League.
Urban League and one of the most famous people in the civil rights movement.
But on your first trip, you went and met his parents, right?
Oh, well, see, I can't remember which trip it was. On our first trip, his parents had us for dinner. And they told a lot. His biography is wonderful and tells a lot about the kind of parents that made him famous.
It's called Vernon Can Read. Now, on the first trip also, which I wasn't on, you met Lillian Smith, right? The famous writer, Southern
Yes.
writer. Yeah.
Yes. We went up into the mountains of Georgia, and where she comes from, and it turns out that a lot of those people up in the mountains sided with the North during the Civil War and were anti-slavery. And she was comes from that tradition, so we just had a wonderful time with her. And one of the 2 trips, I had a chance, I think it was the second one with Tom, to meet the head of education for Georgia, see what this was going to do to the Georgia school system.
So he gave us both papers, which then, I took back, and I was taking sociology then, and wrote the paper for sociology, and got an A on it for my research.
And I wrote the paper in the history of Jim Crow and got an A.
So how did you end up becoming more than just friends?
Oh,
So because I know at some point, right, you were dating other people, and
we had to wait till we both were not dating other people.
So between the sophomore and senior year, a mutual friend of ours got married in Indiana. So Brenda came to the farm, and she and I went up to the wedding. And
so was the wedding in Indianapolis?
it was in up near Winchester, Indiana, over near.
It was in Winchester,
Was it? Yeah.
I think. Wherever that is.
Yeah. So then we drove to the airport in Indianapolis, picked up the person Brenda's mother was engaged to at that point. I drove the car. Well, they made out in the back seat all the way to DePauw.
Oh, was this Max?
This is Max now. But when I got home again the next time, my father said, "That's the woman you should marry." He said, "You're," because that same
Well, obviously,
summer.
I was still going with somebody. And when did you stop going with Marcia?
Well, that same summer, Marcia Borst came down from Chicago to visit me. She got off the train in Shelbyville and came to the farm and offered to help my mother with the rock garden. My mother said, "You can help me with my flowers." And then after church in Letts, we went to Tater Campbell's for lunch. Marcia's my guest. So we had turtle soup and fried squirrel.
That ended it for
She
her.
took the train back to Chicago the next day and said thanks, but nothing.
She's from a very wealthy Chicago family.
You really had
Southern
turtle
family.
soup and fried squirrel?
Yeah.
Never had that in Indiana.
It was a
Well, this was the little town of Letts was a real.
great town. Great town.
Years later, in North Haven, Connecticut, the president of the University of New Haven was having a party, and we were invited because of common friends. And a man from Letts started telling this story about Tater Campbell and the fried squirrel.
Was their specialty?
Nobody could believe it.
But Dad said, and you said, we've been there.
I hadn't been there.
I know Tater.
I know that Tater Campbell.
So
then
Grandpa Lowell said you should marry Mom.
So senior year starts. Tony Andres
Oh,
and I
did not
decided
start on a good note for us, though.
we wanted to move out of the fraternity house, so we rented an apartment behind the Alpha Chi house, and gave us an excuse because I had my first drink that summer. Also, it was a very big summer, so we started going down to a place called Moore's and enjoying ourselves. Both of us were asked to leave on the philosophy honors program because of that.
You were having too much fun?
Too much fun. No. Meantime, the Black Friars were a big deal on campus at that point, and they were going to have their initiation, and they got caught by a security officer. Whose name
Oh, yeah, I can't think of his name either.
so,
the campus security officer?
so the president announced he was suspending the Black Friars. So there's about 16 men. I think there was a couple of women.
Most of them from your fraternity.
No, not very many at that point. So then the students decided they'd go to the administration building and have a rally and protest this. So somehow during the rally, your mother was supporting the president, I was supporting the Black Friars, and we had this humongous argument. And then decided that
You knew when you signed up to come to DePauw that it was no drinking. I was the rule keeper.
and I'm just starting to drink. So this is a pretty nice lifestyle. So anyway, that was a parting of the ways. We still went to Methodist Student Movement on Sunday nights, but that was
Especially since I was president, he was vice president.
So we had to have some kind of truce.
So was this the beginning, at the beginning of your senior year?
Yeah,
Like the first semester?
Early October. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just before it got cold.
But we also had another thing going on, which was whoever finished their thesis first had to take the other one out to dinner or vice versa. So
Mother calls and says, I've finished my thesis, you owe me a dinner.
I said that or you did?
You said that, yeah.
No, I thought I finished my thesis and so I owe you a dinner. But anyway, we got together for dinner and I had broken up with Max. So at that point, neither one of us were going with anybody. And when we went out to dinner, I said, I've got a real problem about graduation because I can't deal with people asking me when Max and I are getting married. Like when's the date, so forth. And so he said, well, I know the answer to that. Let's go to the farm. Why don't you come home to the farm with me till your folks arrive? Between exams
And when the graduation actually is.
it was a couple of days, 2 or 3 days or something. But anyway, part of right then was to go. We went out to Kegel's. Tom was able to drive. Cars weren't allowed on campus, but Tom had a car because he worked part-time for the Methodist Church, visiting old ladies who all loved him to death, because I used to call on people in the nursing home. Anyway, yes. So
Kegel's is an abandoned stone quarry, but it was a park, state park. So we had our first kiss there.
So this was after exams? And as you were going to go?
I don't know.
Or sometime?
But it was, I think exams were finished. otherwise we wouldn't have had time to.
Either that or we
Go
took a
out to the
break.
quarry.
But anyway, by the time we went to the farm, we were an item with each other anyway.
Said, and what did you tell your father, Dad?
Guess what? I'm bringing Brenda in my room. He says, "You're a wise young man."
And I had to tell my mother I'd broken up with Max. My friend Frank, or no, was it the other guy? No, I don't think it was Frank I went to June. I had two friends in the graduating class at West Point. And one of them called me to see if I wanted to, he wasn't dating anyway, he wanted to know if I'd come out for June week, which is just the most fun thing in the whole world. I mean, it's such a celebration. You get to meet all the bigwigs at West Point and have this fabulous dance. And so I'd said yes, but you have to have all these formal dresses. My mother was so delighted that I'd broken up with Max that she sewed and brought 2 dresses for me. And, but fell in love with Tom just about the first moment she met him. So that was a yes from my parents' side.
So had they met you before, Dad, or was that the first time at graduation?
Very first time, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was, in love, so I was all gaga.
And this was all, when I went to the farm was the incident. This is a famous incident in the Stiers family, which is that we went in Grandpa's truck down to what creek?
Bob Creek, no, not Bob Creek, but Flat Rock.
Flat Rock River, and there was this big tree that was down over the river, and we climbed out on it. We were sitting out there kissing and talking, and when we came back to the road, the truck was gone.
Oh no, what happened?
And I don't know if I've ever seen your father so scared.
It was my father's new truck.
The new truck was gone.
And he thought somebody had stolen it.
And he's left the keys in it.
Well, in those days, you left your keys in your vehicle. It wasn't a big deal. You didn't,
Well,
you
some
think
of
it
us
was.
didn't. Some of us from San Francisco didn't. But anyway,
So we
we walked home, which was quite a while. And we walk in the front door, and there is Uncle Chuck rolling on the floor with laughter. And Dad was so relieved he didn't knock him out or anything. It was just really
Huge joke.
Well, when was the incident when didn't someone jump out of the car? Like, didn't Grandpa jump out of the car when he was driving one
This
time?
is the same 3 or 4 days that we're on the farm.
He thought it was terrible that I didn't know how to drive a stick shift. So because he needed to do something, we were in the truck. And he wanted to go do something, but he wanted the truck to be taken home.
You and my dad were in the truck.
Yes, Grandpa and I were in the truck. And he couldn't believe that I could. He said, "Oh, well, it's just easy. You just do this." And then he jumped out.
Was the truck moving?
Yes. So I got it home. But barely.
Pretty scary. So they go back for graduation, and that's Government Mill is the speaker, and it's very hot, but it was fun. Then I went off to Ohio to be trained as an evangelist by the Methodists. Spent the summer in Toledo, Ohio, going door to door, calling on people there, seeing if they'd be willing to come to church.
Now, were you going to Union in the fall? Did you know that already?
Knew that already, yeah.
He knew.
So this was,
They let you in
And I
and you
went
were
to
going to be
work
an
at the-
evangelical Methodist?
that's what I thought.
And I went back to Washington, D.C. to work at the Pentagon in Air Force procurement.
And that's because your parents were living in Virginia.
So I could live free and look for a job. And I did find a job teaching American history in Lanham, Maryland. And so that was moving along. And this guy never called until about, I don't know,
Well,
a few
early
weeks.
August, I decided I should see if she could come out. I had saved enough money, but this time to help her come out and to rent a room at the YWCA and to rent a car for the weekend.
Yeah, it was a lot. We didn't have any money in those days.
So I called her, and fortunately, her mother was in Florida. So I invited her to come out, and she asked her dad, and her dad, I guess, gave me permission. to come.
He said, I don't know if your mother would, and I didn't think she would, but.
But she's not here, so it's okay.
And Barbara was, you're going to marry that guy, aren't you? I could tell. 4 years younger.
So I rented a Ford Fairlane and picked her up at the airport. And
Nice.
took her to the YW. I had no cash. I put it all on that. So every Methodist minister I knew, we had breakfast with one, lunch with another, dinner with another.
And Mom said, I thought I came to visit you, but I'm meeting all of them.
We never in a moment alone. I was pretty sure by the time I left, though, that I was going to marry this guy, and I invited him to come for a week before he went to seminary, and that was it.
So did you go to then come to
I
Virginia?
came to New York and then took the Greyhound bus from New York down to Virginia. And
Asked me to marry him.
asked if we could marry her. And she said yes.
And so where did you ask Mom to marry you?
In the living room of her parents' house.
Oh, very nice.
So best day of my life, and she said yes.
Now, didn't Pad say something to you while you were there about?
Oh, yes.
Well,
I don't know whether it was then or later.
I came back Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've
Or
been keeping
Christmas.
kind of a low key about all this. And so after our Thanksgiving meal, Pat had to go out and get a pack of cigarettes. So he said, Tom, come with me. And we got in the car and he said, young man, you've been here X number of days. What's your intention towards my daughter? Yes, Colonel. I intend to marry her. So the next day we went out and looked for a wedding ring. And, I don't know how we had to buy the Bible. We did somehow.
I
You
don't
were
know how
working,
we
so
did
you
either.
probably had money to loan me.
No, you had the money, honey.
So you had asked Mom to marry you in August.
Well,
You
okay,
made
it was
it
an understanding, but
more official.
yeah.
More official, yeah. Get her father's permission. Get the ring. So we came back with the ring.
Christmas we went to the farm.
Well, Christmas was another great. Her parents have an annual Christmas party.
Oh, yes.
So the commanding officer's wife and I got into an argument over Christmas item. What is swaddling clothes? Because the King James says that baby Jesus was wrapped in swaddling clothes. And she said, Tom, those are cloth soaked in salt. And then the baby's wrapped in it. And I said, it couldn't be. You wouldn't wrap a baby in salt.
She was Greek Orthodox, and she knew what swaddling clothes was, and she was right.
So the authority in the Inmar family was the Encyclopedia Britannica. So we went into the study, got to the encyclopedia down on the floor, and she and I were kneeling there looking, trying to find it.
Kneeling on the floor.
And everybody came in from the party and saw us there.
They're like, what's going on?
That was a big family story with my parents, to see the commanding officer's wife and my fiance on the floor looking up the encyclopedia.
So then we take the train to Cincinnati, and my folks pick us up there. And the first night, I'm sleeping on the floor in the front room, and Brenda's sleeping in the bedroom. And she says, Tom, there's something in the bedroom. So I go in there.
I didn't say, Tom, there's something. I didn't say, Tom, anything. I went, ah!
There was a bat flying around in there.
Oh.
So for some reason, I thought if you got a broom and a dustpan, you could get the bat in between the two. Well, the bat had nothing to do with that.
Forgetting the bats have radar.
Your mother says, let's just open the door that goes outside. She did, and the bat flew. We both were making a lot of noise.
Well, we were jumping on the bed and over, and we're running around and then jumping on the bed and off.
The next morning, we go to breakfast, assuming that my folks had something to say. Not a word.
They're like, we don't want to know why you were screaming in the other room.
Oh, we told them all. Anyway, that was
And then when did you decide you were going to get married the next June?
pretty much right away,
Between Thanksgiving and
Because-
Christmas, yeah.
since his family now lives out there and could come. And DePauw, we had a lot of friends in the next class. And my folks had just moved to Washington, so we didn't have
From
a
San
lot
Francisco.
from San Francisco. We'd been there about a year and a half, so we actually had more friends in Indiana than we had in Washington. So it worked out well. We got married right at DePauw between baccalaureate and graduation. Just had coffee and cake
At Marvin Memorial.
At Gobin Memorial Church.
Oh, go, yeah.
And the Women's Fellowship, because I'd worked with the church, they put on the reception for us for a very modest fee of like $100.
Oh, nice.
Hotter than Hades. Must have been 100 degrees there.
Oh, it was. My hair was just sticking to my head.
And then where did you go for your honeymoon?
We
So
did it.
We drove to Rushville because my folks had all the gifts there. So we went to the motel in Rushville called the Motel Little Charm. That was its literal name. And I went in to get I got made a reservation. They said, "You must have just gotten married." I said, "How do you know that? Look behind you." Here was rice all over me, blowing out of my comfy
Coming out of the
pants.
scuffs.
It was total green bean. So the next morning we go, well, actually that night we go to the Copper Kettle for our special dinner.
Oh, yes, we went to the Copper Kettle.
So it's endeared us to
That's
that.
why we had our 25th at the Copper Kettle.
And then we got the gifts in the car and drove from Rushville to Washington, where Brenda had to finish teaching. And then we were going to take our honeymoon then, down on the islands in North Carolina, Cape Hatteras.
We did.
But a hurricane came. And we got as far as Elizabeth City and spent the night and had to go back because,
Okay.
No, we went to Williamsburg instead.
oh, okay.
Are you sure? Do you remember?
Yes, I do. I remember because I just loved it. Not knowing my parents would later live there for a long time, but we just had the best time.
And then, of course, Brenda was giving up her teaching job. We were going to move to New York that summer. We got married. Brenda had a job with Social Security.
Mhm.
And I had a job with the YMCA in Brooklyn with a group of 12-year-olds. So we had rented an apartment across the street from Union. And we shared it with a single woman.
It was about 83.
Her name was Cozy.
We can't remember anything else about her name except that her first name was Cozy. C-O-S-E-Y.
Very distinctive.
She was a librarian, anyway. It was a great summer. I took my 12-year-olds all over New York because we had a free pass to the subway.
Wonderful.
They had something called Freedom Land. This is before Disney World was famous in the Bronx. So every Thursday we took the whole camp up there, and that was just a ball.
And then you started school
Started school.
at Union.
And then Mother announced that she was pregnant, but she wasn't because she didn't like the job she had.
No, I told them about my job. It was just so boring. It was just terrible, but I had made such a high score on the government exam that everybody just thought, everybody in my class at Social Security was twice as old as I was, if not more, and they had made it by being able to be a GS. We were GS 9s in training, and then we became GS 11s. And we were being trained to be to be computers. We had to do all the computing for Social Security. Now you would do, none of those jobs would exist as they were then. But I figured, how can I get out of this and have people understand? So I told them I was pregnant. And within a month I was. I cannot tell a lie.
It was the foreboding of things to come.
So then she got a job at 475 across the street from the seminary, working for the Methodist Board. At that point, Eileen Ford, right?
Yes. Gretchen Eileen.
Wonderful.
Eileen's after her.
And
Yes.
then she met the three girls that had come from Riverside, California. One who's now Jane Gropp.
So you met.
Jane.
They worked in the same office as
Oh,
me.
so that's how you met.
And we would introduce them to people across the street. Another was Chuck's wife, Janet Foster.
Yeah, we actually got them together the first time. Yeah. Chuck was my roommate over the seminary before I got married.
So two of the three have stayed real close. And old Alice was the other. She stayed close. Alice Austin.
Well,
She was one of the first people to come and meet Gretchen, Corning, New York.
all right. Well, our next segment will be about the Union years, the Union Seminary years.
Okay.